They didn't invite the quiet black girl from years ago to their lavish 20-year class reunion. They laughed. They curated. They struck her name out because in their world, there were always people who were never meant to belong. But what they didn't know was that life had already prepared a ruthless twist. The girl they once looked down on? She didn't just survive. She married a tech billionaire, quietly built an empire, and amassed victories beyond anything they could ever imagine, until it was too late. When this story ends, those who once erased her name would have to stand by and watch. As she signed the ownership papers for a $1.9 million house, the very place they were desperately clinging to as the last proof of their worth. Karma doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives in a black Bentley, wearing diamond bracelets, with a soft smile saying, "I remember everything." Are you ready to see what quiet power truly looks like, and what it might do when it knocks on your very own front porch, Palm Beach, Florida, a blazing golden morning, inside an upscale cafe where a cappuccino costs more than an average person's dinner? In a corner, 5 women sat around a marble table, eyes darting at one another, ruby lips touching crystal glasses. Charlotte Davenport, still the queen bee. Blow-dried blonde hair, eyes sharp as razors. She glided her finger over an iPad screen, scanning the alumni list like she was browsing a high-end menu. Victoria whispered something that made Samantha burst into laughter, her hand tapping lightly on the Chanel bag resting on her lap. Olivia and Hannah leaned back, eyes glittering with that cruel satisfaction only former hallway rulers understood. They didn't just want a reunion. They wanted to restore their crowns, prove that after 20 years their thrones remained untouched. At that moment, with the air scented by French pastries, Charlotte looked up, lips curling into a blade-thin smile. "We'll show them who truly made it to the top." A sweet promise, but also the signal that a new hunt had begun. Charlotte pressed her finger to the screen, enlarging the list of former classmates. Names popped up, each with notes. Who was married, who ran a company, who owned a penthouse in Manhattan. Victoria leaned in, eyes practically glued to the numbers. Samantha scoffed, tapping her crimson nails on the table, voice dripping like honey. "This will be the party of a lifetime. If you don't belong, well, you'll just know." Hannah smirked faintly. Olivia laughed, a sound like shattering glass. Charlotte raised her gaze, sweeping it across her friends. "We're not just throwing a reunion. We're building a stage where all eyes turn to us. They'll envy us, and they'll bow." In that moment, 5 women locked hands through their stares, not out of friendship, but from the same ancient ambition, to stand above the rest. And none of them realized that very ambition was about to fling open the door to a quiet storm they never saw coming. Charlotte set the iPad down, leaned back in her chair, arms folded across her chest. Her eyes gleamed with cold pride. This reunion has to be a declaration. Proof to everyone from the old school that we didn't just keep up, we surpassed them. Victoria laughed, eyes sparkling like diamonds. Exactly. So that every photo they scroll past online chokes them with envy. Samantha bent to adjust her high heels, her voice low but sharp. And whoever doesn't fit the vibe, better stay out. Charlotte nodded slightly, lips curling into an emotionless smile. Precisely. We don't need anyone muddying this perfect party. In that sunny cafe corner, 5 women silently sealed an unspoken pact. They would decide who was allowed in and who would forever stand outside the door. They had no clue that the very name they were about to cross off held the key to turning this entire game upside down. The guest list continued to scroll beneath Charlotte's finger, like a silent parade of powerful names. Until 3 words popped up on the screen, almost out of place in their world. Danielle Brooks. Charlotte's brow twitched, lips pressed into a thin line. Victoria squinted, voice dripping with disdain. "Is she still in Palm Beach or teaching somewhere? Either way, not exactly our crowd." Samantha laughed, placing a hand on Charlotte's shoulder. God, can you imagine? Her standing in the middle of this party, she'd look pathetically out of place. Charlotte shrugged, eyes icy. Don't ruin the mood. She doesn't fit. Delete her. A gentle tap, and those 3 words vanished from the list as if they never existed. They didn't know that in that careless second they had planted the seed of a nightmare. One they would later taste sip by chilling sip, colder than the pricey wine in their hands. The moment Danielle's name disappeared, the air around the table seemed even sweeter. Victoria tilted her head back laughing, golden hair cascading over her shoulders. Samantha leaned in, voice low like sharing a secret. We're creating a list of who truly deserves to be here. That's what will make this reunion special. Olivia laughed, eyes flashing with a cruel light. And to remind them all, who really won after all these years. Charlotte flicked her hair, picked up the iPad as if it were an invisible scepter. Perfect. We're not just throwing a party, we're reaffirming our throne. A silent agreement rippled across the table. These 5 women, still playing the same old schoolyard games, only now with designer bags, diamond rings, and a blind faith that the world still revolved around them. Little did they know, another orbit was forming, quietly but surely, ready to sweep it all away. The coffee outing ended, Palm Beach sunlight glinting off the windshield of Charlotte's Range Rover, casting a cold shimmer on her face. She started the engine, lips curled high, eyes reflecting the same woman who believed she stood atop the pyramid. But when she got home and opened the iron mailbox by the stone gate, Charlotte froze. A thick envelope, stamped with a major bank's logo. She tore it open, skimmed a few lines, and felt her heart plummet into her stomach. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. The nearly $2 million house she planned to turn into her show-off stage was on the brink of being seized by the bank. Charlotte leaned against her car door, breath shallow, hands clenching the notice. In that moment, all the arrogance flaunted at the cafe shrank into something pitifully small. She didn't know. This very desperation would drag her into a chess game where Charlotte no longer had the power to pick her moves. Charlotte stepped into the grand foyer, her heels echoing hollowly on the marble floor. She tossed her purse aside, sank down on the staircase, still clutching the crumpled foreclosure notice. A family portrait on the wall looked down at her. Charlotte beaming beside her husband, arm around their daughter, as if nothing could ever touch them. She closed her eyes, exhaled deeply. The grand reunion was no longer just about bragging. It had become her final lifeline to salvage dignity, to cling to connections that might rescue them from total ruin. Charlotte opened her eyes, gaze hardening. We'll make this party spectacular, and no one can ever find out we're drowning in debt. At that moment, the decision was made, not by reason, but by a frenzied fear willing to grasp at anything to preserve a flawless facade. That night, Charlotte sat at her glossy long dining table, a crystal chandelier glittering above, offering no warmth at all. She flipped open her laptop, sent a flood of emails to event companies, ordered imported flowers, booked a jazz band, and secured a chef who catered exclusively to the elite. Each click of the mouse cut deeper into her already drained bank account like tiny knife strokes. But Charlotte didn't hesitate. She needed everything to be flawless, so no one could smell the fear seeping from her very breath. This will be the night all of Palm Beach talks about, she whispered to herself, eyes blazing with a feverish mix of panic and pride. A night to proclaim. Charlotte Davenport was still Charlotte Davenport. Even though right beneath her Christian Louboutins, the ground had begun to crack, ready to swallow everything whole. The next day, Florida sunlight poured through towering windows, flooding Charlotte's vast living room. This place had once been her pride. Handcrafted ceilings, an Italian fireplace, Persian rugs so thick your feet sank in as if walking on velvet. Now, it was all just a shiny veneer covering a grim truth. This $1.9 million home teetered on the edge of the abyss. Charlotte stood in the middle of the room, eyes drifting across oil paintings and crystal vases, her chest tightening. A whisper sounded in her mind, cold and unfamiliar. This house isn't really yours anymore. She shook her head hard, dismissing it, then clenched her fists. No, she wouldn't lose it. Not when there was still one chance, however fragile, to salvage it all. Inside Charlotte, fear began twisting, transforming into a sharp resolve ready to slice through any remaining ties. Charlotte plunged into preparations with a frenzy that bordered on desperate mania. She called the florist to order flawless white orchids, put down deposits with a catering team serving only the ultra-rich, even hired a string quartet to play throughout the night. Each invoice hitting her inbox was a needle straight into her heart, but Charlotte betrayed nothing. She replied with short, crisp messages, her aristocratic tone revealing not a single tremor of fear. "Make it unforgettable," she texted the wedding planner, adding a champagne glass emoji. Beneath that mask, her palms were drenched in sweat. Charlotte told herself, if the night is perfect, if everyone believes we're still on top, everything will work out. But she had no idea that fragile mask was already starting to crack, and when it shattered, it would reveal the face Charlotte feared most, someone who had gambled all her dignity on a hand about to lose everything. That evening, Charlotte sat at the dining table with her husband, their red wine swirling like blood under the golden light. She smiled, her lips stretched nearly to breaking, as he said, "We're still fine, aren't we? This party, it'll turn everything around." Charlotte nodded, swallowing hard as if gulping down the truth itself. Of course. This will remind them who leads. After that, connections will reopen. Money will come. She spoke like a machine, voice steady, eyes unblinking. But deep inside, something began to tremble, like a dry branch before a storm. Moments later, when her husband left the table, Charlotte sat alone. She looked into her wine glass and saw her own face, warped beneath the crimson ripples. She whispered, "No one can know. No one can see." But fate never cared for whispered pleas. It only waited for the right moment to yank back the velvet curtain, exposing every secret to the cold light. The next morning, a black car slid up the stone driveway, stopping neatly in front of Charlotte's house. A man in a gray suit stepped out, portfolio under his arm, his face cold as marble. Charlotte opened the door, wearing a polite smile, but her eyes immediately darted to the papers in his hand. The man gently set an envelope on the console table near the door. "Mrs. Davenport, this is the final notice from the bank. If you don't clear the outstanding amount within 30 days, we'll be forced to proceed with foreclosure." Charlotte's smile froze, turning to stone. She only nodded, unable to speak, heart pounding violently in her chest. The man left a business card, then walked away, leather shoes echoing hollowly on the marble floor. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving Charlotte standing there, her hand trembling atop the foreclosure papers, thin as air, yet heavy as a boulder hanging over her head. That very night, Charlotte sat in her armchair, phone pressed tight to her ear, her voice small, soft, sometimes even quivering. She called each of her old friends, Victoria, Samantha, Olivia, her words sweet, laced with a cleverly hidden plea. That night will be spectacular. There'll be press, celebrities. Who wouldn't want to be associated with it? She dangled each sentence, listening for any hint of a lifeline, a promise of help, a suggestion of investment, anything to appease the bank. But all she got were hollow laughs, vague lines like, "Oh, darling, everyone's tightening up right now. It's such a hard time." Charlotte dropped her head against the arm of the chair, hands covering her face. She had never felt so small, like a bird clinging desperately to a rotting branch, waiting for the first gust to send her plummeting. A week later, the group gathered again at their old cafe. Same marble table, same eyes sizing each other up over crystal glasses. Charlotte forced her smile wide, as if nothing had ever happened. Victoria glanced at the menu, sighing, "God, the reunion will be fabulous, won't it? Wonder who'll faint when they see your house." Samantha let out a shrill laugh. "And remember, no Danielle Brooks, okay? If she shows up, I swear I'll walk out." Olivia mimicked her, voice exaggerated. "Can you imagine? An IT teacher sitting at a Palm Beach elite table? Hilarious." Charlotte only nodded, lips pressed tight to keep any sigh from escaping. She didn't reveal that right now. They were gossiping about a lavish party, being hosted in a house teetering on the brink of bank repossession, and they had no idea that the name they were mocking today would soon become the one they couldn't tear their eyes from when everything flipped. That morning, Charlotte was at the dining table, carefully typing a final confirmation email to the catering team. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Short, crisp, cold. She walked over, opened it, and was met by a bank agent in a light gray suit. Without a single extra smile, he handed her a paper, voice metallic. "This is a pre-foreclosure inspection order, Mrs. Davenport. The assessment team will arrive next week." Charlotte took the paper, a chill racing up her arm. When the man left, she stood there, bare feet rooted to the stone floor, watching the document tremble in the breeze. Out on the porch, the rose bushes still bloomed arrogantly, as if mocking her. The upcoming party would be the final show. On a stage she no longer controlled. And in the distance, gray clouds gathered, heralding a storm that would soon sweep away every last illusion. That afternoon, Charlotte nearly lost her mind, making frantic calls everywhere. She scrolled through her contacts, finger trembling, dialing one number after another, from an old classmate now in investment banking to a distant cousin running a credit fund. "It's just a short-term loan. After the party, everything will fall into place, you understand." But the answers were brutally identical. Dry apologies, chilly caution echoing from the other end. Finally, Charlotte hung up, letting her phone drop onto the table with a sharp clatter. She cupped her face, took a deep breath, trying to swallow the lump rising in her throat. Charlotte's eyes lifted to the mirror on the wall, catching her own reflection. Red, puffy eyes, hair disheveled, spirit utterly drained. The elegant exterior was now just a hollow shell, so fragile that a single touch might shatter it to pieces. She didn't yet know that this moment of weakness marked the final chapter of the fake empire she had spent her entire life building. 3 days later, a new envelope appeared in the mailbox by the gate. Charlotte stepped out, sunlight glaring so brightly she squinted, grabbing it without a second thought. But when her eyes caught the bolded headline, her heart clenched tight. Private auction notice. Open house for selected clients. Charlotte's fingers dug into the edge of the paper, nails pressing so hard they nearly tore it. She read the lines over and over, each number cold as ice. The bank had decided. Her house, the ultimate symbol of her power and status for so long, would soon open its doors for others to step in, inspect every corner, and admire every detail like it was just another commodity. Charlotte lifted her gaze, staring across the lush green lawn leading to the front door, fury and humiliation twisting inside her. The reunion party she had dreamed of for so long might now become a quiet funeral for the glittering fantasy Charlotte had clung to. That night, Charlotte sat alone in the dim living room, only a table lamp casting light onto the silent walls. On the table lay the auction notice, its edges crumpled from hours of her tight grip. She looked up, eyes drifting into the void. Suddenly, everything seemed foreign. The Italian fireplace, the old paintings, even the grand piano she once bragged about to guests. All still there, dazzling, but now only cold witnesses waiting to watch Charlotte crumble. She took a large gulp of wine, feeling the bitter liquid burn down her throat. Told herself, "I'll still throw that night. They'll come, they'll see, and then it will all be mine again." But deep beneath that self-reassurance, something was cracking, a silent fracture in her heart, signaling the quake that was about to swallow Charlotte Davenport's entire world. That weekend morning, Charlotte stood behind the curtain, eyes wide as she watched the front drive. A sleek black Bentley quietly slid up the stone path, parking neatly before the white steps. Charlotte's heart seized. She blinked, thinking she must be mistaken. But no, the silver logo gleamed. The driver stepped out to open the back door. From the car emerged a woman, elegant, her fitted dress accentuating a powerful silhouette. That face, Charlotte recognized it instantly. Though so different now, confident, serene, eyes sparkling with none of the old shyness. Danielle Brooks. Beside her walked a man, Ethan Mitchell, tech billionaire, hand resting lightly on his wife's back. Charlotte stepped back, fingers clutching the curtain. Her throat went dry watching this scene unfold. The woman they once struck off their list, now calmly ascending her steps as if this was a natural prize she was destined to claim. What would you think at that moment? Who could have imagined that the one they once dismissed would become the very person deciding this house's fate? Charlotte opened the door, forcing out a smile, but it died instantly when her eyes locked with Danielle's. Danielle stood tall, as if the whole world tilted toward her. Palm Beach sunlight flashed across the large stone on her left hand, the unmistakable wedding ring of the Mitchell family. Ethan stepped half a pace forward, his hand on Danielle's waist. His eyes showed no pity or concern for Charlotte, only devotion to the woman at his side. Danielle glanced around the foyer, then smiled softly. It wasn't an arrogant smile, but Charlotte knew exactly what it meant. It was the smile of someone standing on land once thought to be Charlotte's throne. Charlotte's heart pounded wildly. The air inside the house suddenly felt thick, heavy, as if this woman was squeezing it with nothing but her calm gaze. And in that moment, Charlotte understood. The balance of power had completely, terrifyingly shifted. Danielle walked slowly through the grand hall, her heels tapping lightly on the marble, soft but commanding. She placed her hand on the staircase railing, looking up at a painting Charlotte used to proudly show off to every guest. Ethan followed, silent, his expression that of a man evaluating a valuable new piece for his family's collection. Charlotte trailed behind, throat dry, trying to lift her chin to salvage a shred of dignity, but all her words caught when Danielle turned, eyes calm yet piercingly deep. "This house," Danielle said, her voice smooth as wind over the sea, but with an unmistakable core of steel, "is even more beautiful than I imagined." Charlotte froze, feeling as if the entire room was shifting, ready to collapse at any second. For the first time, right here in what was once her proud fortress, Charlotte stood as an outsider, listening to someone else speak about its fate with ownership she no longer held. Charlotte drew a deep breath, pulled her shoulders back, trying to reclaim space in her own home. She forced a wobbly smile, her voice trembling but sickly sweet. "Danielle, it's been so long. You look completely different." Danielle tilted her head slightly, eyes sharp, yet never rude. "Different? Perhaps. Time does interesting things to people." Ethan remained quiet, hand resting on his wife's back, a silent confirmation of her position here. Not just a guest, but possibly the one about to hold all the power. Charlotte swallowed hard, eyes darting quickly to Danielle's ring. The diamond gleamed coldly, mocking every drop of sweat Charlotte had spent clinging to her hollow prestige. In that instant, Charlotte understood more clearly than ever. Every light, every jazz song, every champagne glass at the coming reunion meant nothing. Because the real stage had changed hands, and she was now just a trembling extra waiting for the final curtain to fall. Danielle took a few more steps into the living room, stopping before the large glass doors overlooking the backyard. Beyond them, the blue sea sparkled, waves chasing each other carelessly, unconcerned with the silent battle happening here. Ethan stood beside her, eyes unable to hide the thrill of someone used to buying up everything, even the unfinished dreams of others. He leaned in, slightly asking, "Do you like it?" Danielle placed a hand on her chest, inhaled deeply. Her smile, then, wasn't arrogant. It was the quiet peace forged from years of effort, resilience, and days spent being laughed at. "I think it's perfect." Charlotte stood rooted. Each word from Danielle fell into her ears like a silent knife. No need to shout, no need to humiliate. Just one sentence was enough for Charlotte to realize every scheme she'd spun was about to be gathered up neatly by this woman, placed in her hands, and carried away forever. The bank representative arrived right on time, holding a stack of documents. He gave Charlotte a brief glance, then turned to Ethan and Danielle, a professional smile spreading across his face. "Mr. Mitchell, Mrs. Mitchell, here is the confidential offer. We'll begin accepting bids today." Charlotte opened her mouth to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. She simply stood there, watching Ethan gently place his hand on Danielle's back, then sign the bid, his black ink flowing decisively across the page, slicing through the last thread Charlotte had been clinging to. Danielle said nothing more. She just glanced at Charlotte once, her gaze neither contemptuous nor pitying, merely calm, as if closing a book not worth rereading. When Danielle's hand clasped her husband's, Charlotte suddenly realized that her entire tiny world, painstakingly built over all those years, was now being exchanged between these two people with a single look, a single signature, and that alone was enough to make it all vanish. Charlotte stood frozen as the bank representative gave a small nod, then turned to Danielle, his voice formal. "Congratulations, Mrs. Mitchell. Your offer has been accepted. This house is officially yours." Charlotte's heart seemed to stop. She clutched the edge of the table, nails digging deep into the wood, her face pale. But not a single word of protest came out. All the desperate loan calls, all the pretenses of luxury, now reduced to ashes. Danielle let out a quiet breath, squeezing Ethan's hand. There was no overt triumph in her expression, only an absolute serenity, like someone who had finally set foot on the summit after a long climb through scorn. Charlotte watched this, her throat burning. She saw herself back in high school, brushing Danielle aside at lunch tables. Now, the roles were reversed in the most flawless, breathtakingly cruel way. A full circle of fate closing in, crushing Charlotte's pride with the very rules she once believed would never turn on her. On handover day, the sky over Palm Beach was overcast, gray clouds drifting slowly like bearers of doom. Charlotte descended the staircase step by heavy step, gripping a small suitcase. The opulent rooms that once echoed with smug laughter were now dead silent, only the clatter of her suitcase wheels on the cold stone floor breaking through. She glanced around, trying to imprint every corner, every chandelier, as if hoping her eyes could possess them a moment longer, but none of it belonged to her anymore. Outside, the moving truck waited. Charlotte paused at the steps, inhaled deeply, then turned to look at the villa, now Danielle's, its elegant red-tiled roof and wide windows opening to the sea as if mocking her. A gust of wind whipped by, blowing her hair, making Charlotte shiver. For a fleeting second, she was no longer the powerful Charlotte Davenport, just a worn-out woman, chased from her throne by the very past she had crafted. The massive door closed behind Charlotte with a heavy thud, like a resounding full stop to an entire chapter of life. Inside, Danielle strolled leisurely through the foyer, her fingers brushing lightly over the wooden banister, eyes taking in every detail that now entirely belonged to her. Ethan set a hand on his wife's shoulder, murmuring something. Danielle let out a soft laugh, a small sound that seemed to make the elegant space around them quiver. She stepped out onto the back terrace where the deep blue ocean stretched to the horizon. Cool sea air kissed her skin, her silky black hair lifted by the breeze, the diamond on her hand glittering like a lighthouse signaling triumph. There, amidst that vastness, she closed her eyes, letting the wind carry away remnants of days when she was belittled and cast aside. Old pain quietly dissolved into the waves, leaving only a proud calm. In that moment, all the loops of the past finally closed, making room for a new chapter, one Danielle no longer had to wait to be invited into. She opened the door herself and named it as she pleased. Palm Beach's sunset spilled across the horizon, painting it in deep bands of red and orange. Danielle sat on a wicker chair on the balcony, a glass of wine in hand, eyes following the sun as it sank into the sea. Ethan stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder, giving a gentle squeeze. No words needed, just a knowing look, enough for Danielle to understand that all her years of effort had led her here to this very moment. A light breeze drifted by, stirring her dress. Danielle's lips curved into a smile, not one of revenge, not to prove anything. Just the quiet pride of someone who had survived countless disdainful looks and hands that once pushed her away, now sitting at ease within an empire of her own making. In the fading twilight, she raised her glass slightly, like a farewell to the past. and an embrace of the absolute power now resting gently in her hands. Night descended, the entire villa aglow with soft golden lights, a tranquil castle wholly belonging to Danielle. She sat there, silently watching the glittering night sea, feeling that old storms were finally behind her, with no more power to clutch at her steps. On her hand, the ring sparkled under the lights more than just a diamond. It was proof of her journey from the girl who once ate lunch alone in the corner of a classroom to a woman holding an empire, strong enough to say, "I want," and make it real. There were no loud revenge scenes, no showy biting words, just an expensive silence making others understand on their own. That sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to stand up and quietly build a life that makes those who once dismissed you regret ever doing so. And perhaps, for anyone who was ever pushed away from the table simply for not fitting in, this story is a reminder. Never let someone else's opinion limit who you can become. If this story touched a corner of your heart, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more stories of sweet, silent karma like this.